This is the story of the East India Company, a business that starts out chasing pepper and ends up ruling a subcontinent of 300 million people, raising its own armies, starving millions, and becoming the first corporation the world is too afraid to let fail. Before we go any further, if you want the real story behind the money, the power, and the empires that quietly built the modern world, subscribe to this channel. It is where these deep dive documentaries live, and it is the best way to make sure the next one finds you. It is the last day of 1600. In a candlelit hall in London, a group of merchants kneels on the cold stone floor before an old woman on a throne. She is Queen Elizabeth I, and in her hand is a single sheet of paper. They have come for that paper. It is a royal charter, and it grants them one thing that will change the world: a monopoly on all English trade east of the Cape of Good Hope. Every port, every ocean, every coast between London and the far side of Asia, handed to them on one page of parchment sealed in red wax. They call themselves the Governor and Company of Merchants of London Trading into the East Indies. A long name for a small dream. They think they are chasing pepper, silk, and tea. But what they think they are founding and what they have actually founded are two very different things. Because the real invention is not the ships. It is the money. These men do not have the fortune it takes to send a fleet halfway across the planet. So they do something radical for their age. They pool it. Strangers put their savings into a common pot, buy a share of the voyage, and agree to split whatever comes back. If the ships return heavy with spice, everyone wins. If they sink, everyone loses together. This is the joint stock company. It is like a modern crowdfund, but with cannons. And it is the machine this entire story runs on. No shareholders, no fleet, no empire. Here is the thing almost no one tells you. This move is not unique. Every great fortune in history, every empire that ever clawed its way to the top, runs on the same small handful of hidden patterns. How to borrow power you do not have, where to stand so the money flows to you, how to turn one advantage into 10. The men in this London hall are about to run that playbook better than anyone alive. And once you learn to see it, you cannot unsee it. Which is exactly why I keep coming back to a book called The Empire Code. It takes those 6 repeating moves, leverage, positioning, capital, compounding advantage, and lays every one of them out in plain language, the same structure these merchants use to turn a sack of pepper into a subcontinent. If you have ever wondered why some ventures swallow whole nations while others vanish, this is the blueprint underneath it. Scan the code on your screen or find the link in the description. Now back to those first ships. Because owning the right to a trade and surviving it are two very different things. The first fleets crawl south, past the Cape of Good Hope, into oceans no English merchant has mastered. The voyages take years. And long before the pepper, the dyeing begins. Men's gums rot, their teeth fall out, their old wounds split open as if time itself is running backward. It is scurvy, and it kills without mercy. On some voyages, half the crew is dead before the ships ever reach the Spice Islands. The romance of the East drowns quietly in the bilge water, one body at a time. And the survivors who make it are not welcomed. They are hunted. Because the Spice Islands already have a master. The Dutch got there first, and they treat the spice trade as a thing worth killing for. In 1623, on a small island called Amboina, they seize a group of English merchants, accuse them of a plot, and torture them until they confess. Then they execute them. The Amboina Massacre of 1623 is a message written in blood, and its meaning is simple. The spice is ours. So how does a handful of London traders survive the Dutch, who own the trade and will kill to keep it? They do not. They walk away. And that single act of retreat is the most important decision the company ever makes. Beaten at sea, bleeding money, it lifts its eyes from the tiny islands it cannot hold and looks towards something far larger on the map. A land the size of a continent. A place where the Mughal Empire, the richest power on earth, has ruled for centuries and is just beginning to crack. India. And there, on that vast and fractured land, this failed spice merchant will do the one thing no trading company has ever done. It will stop trading. And it will start raising an army. And an army needs walls. So along the coast of India, the warehouses begin to change shape. At Madras, at Bombay, at Calcutta, stone rises where crates once sat. These are no longer trading posts. They are forts. Thick walls, iron gates, cannon pointed out at the water and in at the land. A merchant company is building castles on someone else's shore, and no one in Delhi is strong enough to tell it to stop. Inside those walls, something even stranger is taking shape. The company begins to raise soldiers of its own. Not Englishmen shipped from home, but local men, Indian men, recruited by the thousand and drilled in the cold European way. Straight lines, volley fire, march, halt, reload, on command. They are called sepoys, and they answer not to a king, not to an emperor, but to a corporation with shareholders back in London. Picture that for a moment. A business with its own standing army, the way a bank might quietly keep its own private legion, ready to march the instant the balance sheet demands it. For years, these soldiers guard the trade. Then the Mughal cracks widen, provinces start pulling loose, and the men in the forts see an opening no accountant could resist. Why merely trade with a rich land when you might simply take a slice of it? It is the year 1757. The place is a mango grove near a village called Plassey in Bengal, the richest province in all of India. On one side stands the army of the Bengali ruler, 50,000 men, cavalry, war elephants draped in armor, swaying like moving hills. And on the other side, a thin, muddy column of just 3,000, led by a former company clerk who traded his ledger for a sword. His name is Robert Clive. Look at those two numbers again. 3,000 men against 50,000. On paper, it is not a battle. It is an execution. So how does it end the other way? How do 3,000 men defeat 50,000? Not with courage, not with muskets, with a single, quiet bribe. Because Clive does not really fight the Battle of Plassey. He arranges it. In the days before the guns, his agents reach the enemy's own commander, a man named Mir Jafar, and they make him an offer. Betray your master. Hold your soldiers back. Stand still while the battle is lost, and when it is over, we will make you the new ruler of Bengal. And on the day of the fight, that is exactly what happens. The great host of 50,000 is there, on the field, armed and waiting. And a huge part of it simply does not move. Elephants stand idle. Cavalry watches. The trap closes on a betrayed prince, and by nightfall, it is finished. Chests of gold change hands. Mir Jafar gets his throne of straw. And the company gets Bengal. The richest province in India falls into corporate hands overnight, won not by conquest, but by a signature and a bribe. The wealth that follows is almost impossible to describe. The treasury of Bengal is thrown open, and the loot pours down the rivers and onto the ships bound for England. Robert Clive, the clerk who came east as a nobody in debt, sails home a millionaire many times over, a private citizen, richer than half the lords of England, richer than dukes whose families had bled for their gold across 500 years. He simply took his in a single season from a single province on behalf of a company whose shares are listed on a market. And those shares, back in London, do the only thing they know how to do. They climb. But the truly monstrous move comes 8 years later, and it comes on paper, not on a battlefield. It is the year 1765. The shattered Mughal emperor, needing money and protection, signs over what are called the Diwani rights. In plain words, he hands the company the right to collect the taxes of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. The revenue of 20 million people funneled straight into the accounts of a trading firm. This is the moment a business stops being a business and starts collecting taxes like a king. Read that charter from London, the single sheet of paper from 1600, and nowhere does it grant the right to govern millions. Yet here it is, doing exactly that. The company now decides who is taxed and how much. It runs the courts. It sets the price of survival for a fifth of the people on that vast plain. It has become a government wearing the mask of a business, and behind the mask there is no crown, no parliament, no answering to the governed. There are only shareholders. And that is the trap the whole thing is walking into. A king, whatever else he is, at least lives among his people and inherits the land his children will one day rule. But this new master lives 8,000 miles away, in coffee houses and counting rooms, and it wants only one thing from Bengal: a number, a dividend paid out every year to men who will never see a single rice field they have bled. Every year, the men in London want that number to be bigger. And there is only one place the extra can come from. Every rupee of every rising dividend must be squeezed, by tax and by force, out of the same 20 million people. The ledgers demand more. Bengal is ordered to give more. Within 5 years, this arithmetic will meet something no accountant has ever put a price on: a catastrophe that will kill more human beings than live in all of England. And through every day of it, the company's ledgers will stay open for business. It is the year 1770. The monsoon rains that feed all of Bengal simply do not come. The paddies crack. The wells drop. And a land the company has already squeezed to the bone begins, quietly, to die. A real government would throw open the granaries. It would halt the exports and feed its people first. But the company is not a government. It is a machine built to answer one question, and only one: what did we return to our shareholders this year? So while the fields turn to dust, its agents do the unthinkable. They keep loading ships with grain and sailing them out of Bengal's ports. They corner what rice is left and hoard it, waiting for the price to rise as the hunger spreads. The people who studied this later put it plainly. The rains failed, sure. Famines had come and gone in Bengal for centuries. But what turned a hard year into a mass grave was a company that looked at a shortage and saw a margin. And the price does rise. So does the dying. Whole villages empty out. Mothers sell their children for a single meal, then starve beside them anyway. By the time the rains return, an estimated 10 million people are dead. 1 in 3 human beings in Bengal, gone. And here is the question the history books avoid. While 10 million people starve to death, what happens to the share price? It climbs. Sit with that. 10 million bodies in the dust, and back in London, the joint stock share, that same little slip of ownership the merchants dreamed up 170 years before, ticks upward. Healthy, profitable, calm. The machine feels nothing, because the machine was never built to feel anything at all. But greed has a way of overreaching. The company has swallowed a subcontinent, and a subcontinent is not swallowed cheaply. Every fort, every regiment of sepoys, every private war against a rival prince has been financed on borrowed money. The loot of the next victory always promised to cover the debts of the last. For a while, the arithmetic holds. Then it stops holding. By 1772, the richest corporation on earth is standing on the very edge of bankruptcy. The famine has gutted the tax revenue it was counting on. The loans all fall due at once. And here is the trap. Half the banks and lords and members of parliament in London hold company stock. If it goes down, it does not go down alone. It takes the entire financial system of Britain with it. So the company makes a move. The exact move every empire since has copied. It does not quietly fail. It does not throw itself on its creditors. It walks straight into Parliament at Westminster, and it demands a bailout. Where have we heard this before? A company too big to fail, walking into a government to demand its own rescue, and getting it. Because the men in power do the math, and the math is terrifying. A crash of the company is a crash of everything. So the government obliges. It hands over the loan. And in that single moment, a business chartered to buy pepper and silk becomes the first corporation in history the world is simply too afraid to let die. No one calls it a bailout yet. There is no word for it. The company is inventing the thing itself. But a rescue always comes with a leash. In exchange for the money, the Crown reaches in and takes the controls. First, the Regulating Act, planting a government-appointed governor-general over the whole operation. Then, a decade later, the India Act, chaining the company's every decision to a board in London answerable to the state. Business and government fused into one strange creature. And for another 100 years, that creature rules a fifth of the human race. Look closely at what has happened. For most of its life, this thing was a government wearing the mask of a business. Now the mask is turned inside out. The Crown wears the company. The empire and the corporation have become the same body, and no one can any longer say where one ends and the other begins. The end, when it comes in fire. 1857. The sepoys. The Indian soldiers the company armed and drilled and used to conquer their own homeland, finally turned their guns the other way. The rebellion of 1857 tears across northern India. Forts burn. The uprising is crushed with a savagery that shocks even London. And when the smoke clears, the British state has seen enough. It strips India out of corporate hands and rules it directly as a crown possession. The company lingers on, a hollow shell drawing its dividends until 1874, when it is quietly, almost apologetically, dissolved. No battle, no headline, just a flag lowered for the last time. But do not mistake the death of the venture for the death of the idea. Because the East India Company proved something no one had ever proved before. It proved that a business could raise its own armies, topple kings, collect taxes from millions, starve millions more, and never break stride. It proved a corporation could grow larger than the empire that created it. And then, when its own recklessness finally caught up with it, be rescued because it had become too big to let fall. Every modern corporation that lobbies a government for a rule written in its favor is speaking that language. Every giant that swallows its rivals until no competitor is left is speaking that language. And every institution that gambles until it is drowning, then walks into a capital and demands its own rescue, and gets it because the alternative is collapse, is reading from a script first written on a single sheet of paper, in a candlelit hall in London, on the last day of 1600. The glass towers are new. The lobbying corridors are new. The move inside them is 300 years old. The venture is gone. The blueprint remains. The East India Company. Vanish.